hidden cost of technological supremacy. Napoleon once said, "An army marches on its stomach." In the 21st century, the army of progress marches on critical minerals. The West is marching into a technological arms race, without the supply chain of critical minerals needed to win. We're fixated on artificial intelligence, semiconductor supremacy, defense innovation, and software-driven transformation. We talk about the cloud, a word that makes technology sound light, clean, and infinite. But the truth is, the cloud is actually really heavy. Our digital civilization, for all its talk of data and ideas, runs on copper, lithium, nickel, and silicon. It's all mined and refined and transported through fragile global systems dominated by China. Every act of innovation deepens our dependence on materials that we no longer control. This year, I read 4 books that define how we think about power and technology in the 21st century. Chip War by Chris Miller is the definitive account of how semiconductors became the world's most strategic technology. Today, over 90% of advanced chips are made in Taiwan and South Korea. Miller calls semiconductors the oil of the digital age. He's right, but only half right. The chip supply begins not in the fab, but in the mine. Silicon sovereignty starts with silicon, and silicon comes from sand, mined, refined, and powered by copper grids. The Technological Republic by Alex Karp and Nicholas Samiska is a call for the West to rebuild an innovation ecosystem grounded in moral purpose and democratic strength. They talk about industrial policies and strategic resilience, but they stop short of the rare earths, lithium, and copper choke points that all of this industrial policy depends on. Supremacy by Parmi Olsen chronicles the AI arms race between OpenAI and DeepMind, but also treats AI as weightless, as though the colossal hardware that trains these models appears by magic. The mineral and energy footprint behind each GPT iteration never enters the frame. Unit X by Raj Shah and Christopher Kirchhoff takes us inside the Pentagon's tech incubator. It comes a bit closer to the truth. It shows how defense innovation now depends on commercial AI and rapid prototyping. But even here, the physical base of defense infrastructure, the magnets, the alloys, the semiconductors that make all of this possible barely get a mention. It's quite ironic because the last chapter is literally titled From Steel to Silicon, and yet never once asks where the steel or the silicon come from. Each book tries to explain the race for technological power, the struggle between democracies and autocracies for control of code, chips, and intelligence. And to be fair, these are brilliant, urgent, and insightful books, and they capture contemporary zeitgeist. But they all share the same blind spot: ignorance of the mineral imperative, the materials upon which every single technology depend. They speak as though innovation happens in a vacuum, as if servers, satellites, and power grids are conjured from thin air. The missing chapter in every book is the physical foundations, the metals and minerals that underpin the technology they want to build. Together, they show us a great digital convergence, how every industry is now dependent on technology. But they clearly think that the technology is the power, and they've given zero consideration to the power held by whomever controls the materials required to build and power the technology. There's a really powerful image in Unit X. At an Aspen Institute conference, former U.S. Navy Secretary Richard Danzig explains technological change through a parable. He asked the audience to imagine Lake Michigan, empty. In 1940, an ounce of water is poured in. Every year, it doubles. By 1950, you've got a gallon. By 1960, 150 gallons. By 1970, 16,000 gallons. A swimming pool, basically. By 2000, there's actually a sheen across the bottom of the lake. By 2010, you've only got a few inches of water. By 2020, better, you've got 40 feet of water. And then, a mere 5 years later, in 2025, the lake is full. 1.3 quadrillion gallons. His point? technological growth compounds, slowly, and then suddenly. It seems stagnant for decades, and then the dam bursts. It's a really compelling metaphor. They could visualize a beautiful lake of technology, even a super powerful hydroelectric dam. But what no one in that room of technologists seemed to consider was how much actual physical water it takes to fill a lake. Let me repeat the number: 1.3 quadrillion gallons of water. I didn't even know what a quadrillion was. I had to look it up. If technology is the lake, then metals and minerals are the water. One cannot exist without the other. The metaphor still holds, but not the way the Aspen crowd intended. They saw power, infinite innovation, the exponential curve of code, but they completely ignored the sheer volume of water required to fill that lake and immediately forgot how long it took to fill. That is the elite blindness to the mineral imperative. The true cost of technology can be measured in tons of copper, silicon, lithium, and rare earths. Why does this blindness persist? Well, it's not actually ignorance. These are really smart guys. It's psychology. Psychologists call it abstraction bias, but ultimately it comes down to the out of sight, out of mind. For decades, economic value has shifted from manufacturing to services. The smartest and the best paid people didn't build the machines. They designed them and they programmed them. Even if they knew where the factory was, they never considered where the factory got the raw materials. The higher up the economic pyramid we climbed, the further away we got from the mine, the mill, and the foundry. Technologists believe in a world of infinite scalability because software scales effortlessly, but matter does not. The tech elite have mistaken the scalability of code for the scalability of what's in the Earth's crust. And frankly, it just doesn't work that way. There are physical limits to everything, including what we can get out of the Earth's crust and how fast. For 50 years, technology has relied upon something called Moore's Law. Gordon Moore observed that transistors double their capacity for storing data while getting smaller every 2 years. This became not just a technical benchmark, but a governing psychology for technology. It promised economies of scale would be infinite, smaller, faster, cheaper, forever. But in the last decade, Moore's Law has officially reached its limit. NVIDIA, the chip maker that is responsible for the world's most advanced AI GPUs, Jensen Huang, the CEO, declared in 2022, Moore's Law is dead. TSMC, the world's largest chip maker, has echoed this, warning that fabrication is hitting the limits of physics, atomic scale barriers, astronomical costs, and rising energy demand. For 50 years, Moore's Law made us believe that technology could defy gravity. Now, gravity is reasserting itself. The miracle of the microchip was always built on matter: silicon, germanium, gallium, antimony. And as we reach the atomic limits of what can be etched, cooled, and powered, that fantasy of infinite growth collapses into the same truth miners have always known. Progress gets harder, not easier. For the first time in history, every major industry is converging around technology, and therefore around minerals, whether they know it or not. Consumer goods have become consumer electronics. Cars have become EVs that consume 6 times more minerals than their petrol equivalent. Defense systems rely on antimony, tungsten, titanium, and rare earths. Telecoms need gallium and indium. Renewables require mountains of copper, nickel, and graphite. AI and data centers devour electricity, steel, and copper. This isn't diversification, it's concentration. All roads lead to the same materials. Technology is growing exponentially, but the material supply chains are not. The International Energy Agency projects that mineral demand just for clean energy technologies alone will quadruple by 2040. If you add in AI and defense, the demand for key minerals like copper, lithium, and nickel could increase tenfold. We are electrifying, digitizing, and militarizing all at once, compounding our energy and material needs, all drawing from the same finite geological reservoir. This isn't ideology, it's arithmetic. AI data centers alone could double global electricity use by 2030, consuming nearly 1,000 terawatt hours per year, roughly 9% of total global electricity demand by 2050. Each hyperscale facility requires tens of thousands of tons of copper and aluminum and millions of liters of cooling water. EVs already consume half the world's lithium supply. Wind turbines and transmission lines will require 400% more copper and aluminum by mid-century. We are funding data centers with no idea where the material to build them will come from. The more digital our world becomes, the more material it gets. AI training demands power, which demands electricity, which demands copper. EVs demand batteries, which demand lithium, cobalt, and nickel. Defense and space demand permanent magnets and alloys, which depend on rare earths, tungsten, germanium, and gallium. A shortage anywhere ripples everywhere. A gallium shortage can stall AI chip production. A copper crunch can halt construction on a power plant. A rare earth export ban can literally ground fighter jets. The irony? AI itself, the tool we all hope will help us optimize these supply chains, could have its growth throttled by its own power material requirements. While the West dreams in code, China builds in concrete. It now controls around 70% of rare earth mining, 90% of refining, 60% of lithium, 70% of cobalt, and 80% of graphite, as well as nearly all gallium and germanium. This wasn't luck. It was policy. Their industrial policy included not just coders and designers, like ours did, but it also included fabricators and factories, miners and refiners. It was end to end. A deliberate 30-year industrial strategy that treated mining and refining as essential instruments of national power and technological supremacy. Now, Beijing is flexing that control, restricting exports of gallium, germanium, antimony, and rare earths. The result? Supply shocks in Western defense, EV, and semiconductor sectors, and quiet panic in Washington and Brussels. This is the new resource war, fought not with tanks, but with export licenses. We are finally discovering that the weightless economy isn't weightless at all. Every byte of data has a physical cost. Every dream of clean technology demands a mountain of ore. The AI revolution has been framed as a battle for algorithms, but the real front line is in the dirt, in the mines, the refineries, the choke points that feed the machines. Software supremacy, for all its glamour, is an empire built on metals. Without lithium, no batteries. Without gallium and germanium, no chips. Without copper, no power. If the 20th century was the age of oil, the 21st century is the age of metals. Whoever controls them controls everything. That means to win the technology war, we need to rebuild domestic mining and refining, develop deeper trading relationships with our trading partners, create resilient supply chains with redundancies. We need to reroute some of that technology toward making mining and refining work better. We need to invest in recycling and treat critical minerals as national security assets. The new industrial enlightenment of the electro-digital age needs to reconnect innovation with extraction and remind the digital generation that civilization still runs on material inputs. The cloud is made of copper. Intelligence runs on indium. Supremacy is smelted from ore. Without lithium, the EV revolution stops. Without neodymium, drones don't fly. Without copper, the digital economy goes dark. An army marches on its stomach, and the West is marching into a technological war with no supply chain to feed the front. Whoever controls the minerals controls the machines, and whoever controls the machines will shape the century. It's time to start digging like our future depends on it, because it does. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Critical Minerals Uncovered. I'm your host, Amanda Van Dyke. If you enjoyed it, please share and follow us on your favorite social media.